I never saw my name on anything that mattered in our house. Not on birthday banners. Not on chore lists. Not even in stories told at the dinner table. In the Calder household, names were currency and mine was always broke. Dinner was the same every night. Same oval table. Same chandelier overhead. Casting light that seemed to stop right before it reached my seat. I always sat at the far edge, half shadowed, half seen. Lorraine, my mother, had a way of saying Vivian's name like it was a song she wrote herself. Vivian's team won the dance-off again, she'd say. Vivian was asked to lead the recital. I once won an art contest at school. Didn't make it to the table conversation. Henrik, my father, rarely chose sides. That was his role. Silence that disguised itself as peacekeeping. But peace in that house was just a favor done to whoever shouted loudest. I learned early that in our home, agreement was called respect. Obedience was called love. Have you ever lived in a house where raising your voice felt like committing a crime? It was during my freshman year of high school when Ms. Alden, my art teacher, pulled me aside. She handed me a sealed envelope and said, "Open it with someone who believes in you." I didn't say anything. I just nodded, even though I didn't have such a person. It was a scholarship application. Not full ride, but real, my first lifeline out. When I showed Lorraine the letter, she scanned the page, exhaled sharply, and tossed it into the trash like it was a receipt from a store she didn't remember visiting. "You need to be helping your sister, not chasing pipe dreams," she said. "Art doesn't pay rent." Vivian leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded, smirking. Her silence was louder than the garbage can lid slamming shut. Henrik stood nearby. He looked at me. Then he looked away. That was the first time I understood. Dreams don't always die on their own. Sometimes they're murdered by the people you're told to love. Has anyone ever told you your dream was too big for the walls you lived in? A few weeks later, we hosted a family gathering. Lorraine wanted everything to be perfect. That meant new tablecloths, polished silverware, and, apparently, a new dance costume for Vivian. The money came from the savings I'd hidden in an old cigar box under my bed. All gone. I waited until the roast was served to speak. My hands shook, but I didn't stutter. That money was mine. I saved it for college. The room froze. Vivian gasped dramatically, tears threatening but never falling. "I didn't know," she whispered. Lorraine stood. "Don't make a scene." "You took it," I said louder, without asking. Then came the slap. Not hard enough to bruise skin, just hard enough to bruise belief. "Know your place in this family," she hissed. No one said anything. Not Uncle Rudy. Not Aunt Denise. Not Henrik. The silence was heavier than the slap. I realized that night that truth had no seat at our table. Only performance did. What hurts more, the slap or the silence after it? Months passed. I stopped drawing for a while. Then the envelope came. The one with my name on it, only it wasn't in my hands first. Vivian got to it before I did. The acceptance letter. Full scholarship. A program that would have taken me to a different state, a different life. She forged my signature, responded on my behalf, claimed it. All of it. I found out through my Aunt Henrik's sister, who had connections at the foundation. When I confronted Lorraine, she didn't deny it. "It would have embarrassed Vivian," she said. "Let it go. This family doesn't need more shame." That was when I understood they weren't just ignoring me. They were actively, intentionally building a cage. Some families don't break you by accident. They do it on purpose. Would you have exposed them? Or stayed quiet just to survive? My aunt offered to take me in. Said I could move to Oregon. Finish school. Start fresh. Lorraine shut it down in a single breath. Vivian needs her sister. Henrik stayed quiet again. I saw it clearly. I wasn't a daughter. I was a support beam in a stage they built for Vivian. You ever stay somewhere, not because they loved you, but because you were useful? I was 17 when Vivian brought her boyfriend home for the holidays. His name was Grant. He wore a tailored coat and shook hands with too much eye contact. Dinner was loud. Laughter bounced off the chandelier. The roast chicken was perfect, the mashed potatoes buttery. Then it got quiet. Vivian smiled, wine glass in hand, and pointed at me. "This is the useless one," she said, giggling. The table followed. Soft chuckles. Amused nods. Nobody stopped her. It wasn't what she said. It was how easily it slipped out of her mouth, how rehearsed it sounded, like she'd been waiting for the right audience. The laugh was sharp, like a fork dragged across the inside of my ribs. I didn't cry. I didn't leave the table. I just made a mental note. That night, I understood. Silence wasn't my weakness. It was my weapon. Sometimes it takes just one sentence to rewrite your whole childhood, doesn't it? That was the last night I let them decide who I was. Walking into Ellison and Company felt like entering a second version of my childhood home, just with better lighting and bigger egos. I had a badge, a title, a salary, and yet the same ache lived beneath it all. Vivian had already staked her ground. Everyone knew her, respected her, laughed too loud at her jokes. They called her the rising star behind closed doors, and Viv when they wanted to seem friendly. I was assigned to the strategy division beneath a manager Vivian once coached through public speaking. A coincidence, they said. I didn't believe in those anymore. I watched carefully. Who stood when she walked in? Who deferred when she interrupted? Who avoided eye contact when I spoke? Offices have hierarchies, but this one? It had royalty. Ever walked into a room and immediately felt the politics before you heard a single word? 3 weeks. I lived inside a pitch deck for 3 weeks. Late nights. Takeout dinners. Strategy revisions until my eyes throbbed. It was mine, every chart, every angle, every word. Then it disappeared. Hours before the client presentation, I opened the shared folder to double-check everything. What I found was a revised version of the deck. My content was there, just reorganized, rebranded, and relabeled. Every contributor box listed Vivian Calder and no one else. I checked the email trail. The version she sent to the exec team had already gone out. I was erased without a trace. I didn't storm out. I didn't scream. I sat quietly and watched her take the stage. "You should have worked faster," she said to me afterward. Lips curled just slightly. "Corporate moves quick." Different house. Same rules. Has anyone ever stolen your work, knowing you couldn't call them out? Later that day, Theo March tapped my shoulder in the break room. He didn't speak at first, just handed me a USB drive and whispered, "I saved the original. Metadata's intact. Thought you'd want it." I saw the fear in his eyes, but also something else, resolve. I checked the drive alone at home. Every file time-stamped. My name coded into each layer of the design. My fingerprints were everywhere. Truth didn't shout. It whispered. It was the first time in years I had a card to play. I didn't rush. I studied. I plotted. Sometimes the smallest piece of truth is enough to tilt the whole table, isn't it? Vivian struck next. HR called me in. Marta Ruiz. I sympathetic, but rehearsed. "We've received concerns about your stress levels," she said. "Your ability to manage timelines. Emotional regulation. Memory accuracy." I stared. No blinking. Vivian had framed the script. Maris seems overwhelmed. She gets defensive. She misremembers details. Then came the second report, this time about a mishandled email thread with a client. I hadn't even sent it. I didn't fight back yet. I started documenting. Timestamps, screenshots, voice memos. Every time Marta said something phrased just like Vivian. Every sideways glance from team members. Every suspiciously timed glitch. Ever been accused of something so calmly you almost believed it yourself? Grant Ellison ran quiet meetings, the kind where your own breathing felt too loud. In our next team strategy session, Vivian presented a summary that veered off from his earlier instructions. Slight but real. Riley Hobb, who rarely spoke more than 10 words a day, looked at Grant and said, "Might be good to revisit the draft from early March." Grant nodded. Nothing more. But then, during the next meeting, he frowned. Not confusion. Not frustration. Something cooler. Analytical. I caught the shift. So did Vivian. Her voice tightened. She talked more than usual. Over-explained. Funny how leadership notices the cracks long before the guilty think they're seen. The company holiday party wasn't black tie, but Vivian dressed like it was. She wore deep emerald, lips the shade of command. Grant arrived late. She pulled him into the center of the room, like she owned it, and him. People laughed, drank, danced. And then, "No room for useless people," she said, raising her glass, eyes sliding in my direction. The laugh that followed wasn't even loud, but it was full of knowing. Everyone glanced at me, just for a second. I didn't flinch. I held Grant's eyes. He didn't smile. The insult wasn't new, but the audience was. Words hit differently when they're meant to break you in public, don't they? I watched Grant watching her. Not with affection, with calculation. I didn't know it then, but the next move would be mine. The morning after the party, the city moved like nothing happened. But in my apartment, something had shifted. I sat at my kitchen table, no makeup, no pretense, a mug of cold coffee beside a stack of notes. Vivian's words, "No room for useless people," didn't sting anymore. They organized things. I replayed everything she'd done at work, not as insults, but as steps. She'd stolen, misled, manipulated. I started listing, not for memory, but for structure. Every stolen file, every HR complaint, every whispered lie she wrapped in charm. My voice was quiet, steady. Silence isn't surrender. It's surveillance. Henrik once told me, "Truth doesn't need volume, just proof." Have you ever realized the only person coming to save you is you? I named the folder Timeline. Inside it, hundreds of files all organized by date, labeled with only facts. Vivian's edits, her reapprovals, her forged budgets, her digital fingerprints. I found things she probably forgot. Ghost signatures on internal invoices. One matched Lorraine's handwriting, digitally pasted. Theo sent another drive. He'd pulled system logs that showed Vivian deleted the same folder 12 times. The pattern was surgical and sloppy. I didn't respond. I cataloged. Screenshot after screenshot. Time-stamped. Sorted. Labeled. Revenge isn't shouting. Sometimes it's spreadsheets. Vivian struck first again. She filed a complaint claiming I'd altered metadata. HR summoned me. Marta looked tired. Professional, but tired. Vivian put on her usual show, wide eyes, a trembling voice. Framed pauses like she was in a courtroom drama. Then came Lorraine. A voice message. Sharp, dismissive. "You're humiliating your sister. End this. You always did have a problem knowing your place." I didn't reply. I dragged the file into a folder named for later. Ever notice how the guilty cry louder than the innocent? The family demanded a discussion. It was staged at Lorraine's house. The same living room, same uneven coffee table, same lighting that always made my skin look tired. Vivian cried, said I was unstable, said I was obsessed with ruining her career. Lorraine asked me, gently, coldly, to be the bigger person. I stood, calm, no shouting. I spoke like Henrik did when he fixed broken things, quiet, methodical, precise. I'm not withdrawing. The truth doesn't need permission. I left. The door shut softly behind me. Sometimes the hardest door to close is the one you were born behind. Grant called an all-hands meeting 2 days before the new year. Said it was about transparency reporting. The room was packed. I stood in the back where I always stayed. He showed slides, original project decks, file logs, metadata trails, 12 folder deletions, internal approvals linked to Vivian's account. A budget form stamped with Lorraine's digital signature. Vivian denied. Denied hard. Called it sabotage. Grant paused, then turned to the last slide, a signature comparison. We traced this back to a file created on Vivian's home device. Forgery. She broke. Right there. In front of everyone. Hands shaking. Voice gone. Not rage. Just collapse. Grant didn't raise his voice. He looked at her and said, "We don't fire useless people. We fire dishonest ones." Truth has a sound, and when it drops, the room always goes quiet. Hours later, Lorraine called. "You ruined your sister." I waited, then answered, "No, I stopped lying for her." She didn't listen. She deflected, said family mattered more than ego. I ended the call. Not cruel, just final. Would you save a family that never once saved you? A week later, I cleaned out the last of my things from the Calder house. My old room smelled like dust and lemon polish. Behind a loose panel, I found an envelope. To Maris, for when you finally walk away. Henrik's handwriting. Inside, 4 pages. No fluff, just honesty. I saw it. I didn't know how to stop it. But I saved this for you. He'd opened a small fund. Not much, but enough. Enough to say, I knew you'd need a clean start. You were never the useless one. You were the one they feared would leave. Sometimes the apology comes from the only person who never got to say it aloud. That night, I made dinner in my apartment, just for me. Pasta, garlic, good olive oil. I plated it gently, poured 1 glass of wine. I whispered, "This time I'm the one choosing me." And choosing myself was only the beginning.